Another guy that I like, he's a little bit higher up. He's the wide receiver 27 in ADP right now. It's Devante Parker.
Let's go.
I love him as a
Our
desperation
boy.
wide receiver 2 or a weekly flex. He has upside to me to repeat near that fringe wide receiver 1 territory where he was. He's so good. He's tall, 6'3". He's fast. He was a wide receiver 11 in PPR last year, 128 targets,
That could
72
go up this
receptions.
year too. If Fitzpatrick plays all 16, we don't know what's going to happen with Tua, but Devontae's targets steadily rose throughout the season, and we've seen those opt-outs. I hate to interrupt you there, Steph, but that 128 targets could easily go up to 140, 150 this year. That's exciting.
No, you're so right. And I'll talk about the quarterbacks here in a second, but he had 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. And he can regress in all of those categories: the targets, the receptions, the yards, the touchdowns, and he'd still be a top 20 wide receiver. He was 13th in targets last year, 5th in deep targets, 4th in air yards, 8th in contested catch rate. We know he's good. We've seen the ceiling now. It just comes down to two things for Parker, and those to me are Preston Williams and the quarterback position. But with how hard Parker broke out last year, that fifth-year breakout, it's tough to see him just completely falling off a cliff and finishing outside the top 24. It would be insane for me to see that happen, at least with Fitzpatrick out there and all the upgrades that the Finns offense and defense have made. The thing that scares me with Preston Williams, he looks healthy on Twitter. I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but so far from what we've seen from camp, he looks healthy, running routes, one-handed catches, doing his thing. And with Preston in the lineup, Parker was the wide receiver 36. And then he exploded and was the wide receiver 2 from weeks 10 to 17. My bet is that he lands somewhere in the middle this year. I am a Tua believer. Betting on Tua right now feels like a pretty safe bet. And if he comes in and he's great, or even if he's just okay, I think that's fine for Parker. If the hip bothers Tua or he has some ramp-up time that he needs and it's Fitz magic again, then we're back to right where we were. We know the rapport is there with Fitz and Parker. A Mike Giuseki breakout could help open things up as well. Parker, to me, feels like one of the safer bets to beat his ADP at 27. I have him right in the cusp, like the 24 to 22 range.
I like Parker a lot. At first, he was kind of low in my rankings, and he's slowly been rising as someone I'm very, very comfortable taking as my wide receiver too. And Steph, you mentioned the splits with Preston Williams. I'm not as worried about Preston Williams and Devante Parker. I mean, you look at the opt-outs, they got to throw the ball to someone. There should be plenty of opportunity for Parker, Williams, and Giuseki in this offense with Albert Wilson and Allen Hurns both opting out. And I think the biggest correlation with the poor production in the first half of the season was actually Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen threw the ball 109 times last season, so he had about, close to 20% of the Dolphins' pass attempts. He was in there early and often early in the season, so I think more of the struggles for Devante Parker were due to Josh Rosen, and also this team had no identity early on. Remember early in the season, they got blown out by the Ravens week 1. They started fire sailing all their good players. They traded Minka and Kenyon Drake, and they were just shelling guys out left and right. So I think a lot of the problem with this Dolphins team was it took them a while to find their identity, and that came when Ryan Fitzpatrick was the quarterback. Now this season, we don't know if Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be the quarterback for, honestly, to start the season. I think he is, but to start the season or the whole season, I think it would make sense for Tua to come in if he really is healthy at some point in 2020. And it's not to say I don't believe in Tua as a player or a prospect, but like you said, that's very concerning for the pass volume because we don't know what the offense is going to look like with Tua. So with Parker, if you told me Fitzpatrick was going to start 16 games in this offense, I think Parker would be higher in my rankings than he is now. I'm baking in a little bit of risk just because the volume could come down with Tua as the quarterback. And this was a bottom third scoring offense last season. So the bar is not super high for Parker to have, the offense doesn't have to be even top half in the league for Parker to see a similar volume and scoring opportunity that he did last season. They can still be pretty weak as a whole offensively, and Parker can still produce. So, yeah, I think the garbage time could be there for this Dolphins team, and they're going to be a much improved team this season. I think people are probably sleeping on them. I think they could get 6 or 7 wins. Doesn't sound like a lot, but for the Dolphins, it's pretty decent.